What's up, everyone? Welcome to a very special RotoGrinders show covering the NBA Finals. Game 1 is almost upon us. We have the Oklahoma City Thunder facing off against the Indiana Pacers. I'm your host today, TJ Zwarich, helping me break it down. We got two of the sharpest minds in the biz, especially two of the sharpest NBA minds in the biz. These guys know ball, as they say. First up, always helping us in the showdown streets, we got Head Chopper. Chop, how you doing this evening? I was going to say this afternoon.
Afternoon, bro. It's good afternoon. It's all right. You know, I did a little yard work today. I'm ready to go, man. I'm ready for this series to kick off tomorrow. We got a nice long break here in between the finals in the Eastern and Western Conference. So I'm ready to get some basketball back.
Should be a very fun series. OKC obviously very heavily favored, but that's nothing new to the Pacers. They're used to being the heavy underdogs and just coming out and getting the wins in these series regardless. So should be a fun one. And helping us break down game 1, we have Kyle Murray. How you doing, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Like Chop mentioned, been kind of a long layoff, no basketball for a while, but it'd be good to get back into the swing of things here and start talking about some NBA Finals. I agree, it is an interesting spot for the Pacers, heavy underdogs, but like you mentioned, they're a volatile team, so I think that they're kind of right where they want to be. So looking forward to it.
Smash the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our shows, because we're going to have these shows for the NBA Finals throughout each of the games, as long as the sites keep giving us these nice prize pools, which I'm sure they will since it's the finals. And we're going to try and go live the day before the finals game to give you guys lots of chance to view it in your own scheduled window, because we want to make sure that you get an NBA content that is reasonably timed for you, depending on when you're starting out your research. However, you want to hit that notification bell so that you do know when we go live, so that if you can, you might as well come hang out with us live, get into the RotoGrinders live stream Discord, get into the YouTube chat, drop us a like, drop your questions, your predictions for game 1 of the NBA Finals, and that's what I want to start with now as well. Chop, I'll throw it to you first. We have these heavily favored Thunder. How do you think game 1 is going to go? Are the Thunder just going to be taking it to the Pacers, or the Pacers have a shot here?
Great question. That was a great question. Like I honestly said from the start of the playoffs, go back on record now. I do the MLB Grinders Lives. I've been telling Dean forever, Pacers are a sleeper. They're very, very good. They have, like, I want to believe in the Pacers. I believed in them through the whole Eastern Conference. Definitely thought they could win the East. Against OKC, man, I still want to believe, but golly, this is a tough one for them. So I want to believe in them long term for the series. For game 1, I think I'm still going to have to lean on OKC here to pull away and win this game in a high-scoring affair. But for the series, still pretty bullish on the Pacers.
Kyle, how about you? What do you think's going on in game 1 here?
Yeah, I mean, Chop mentioned the high-scoring affair, 231 total, which for an opening game, I mean, that's been one of the higher opening totals that we've seen over the past few series on both sides of the conferences. So should be a lot of scoring. Obviously, two teams that like to play fast, like to get a lot of possessions, a lot of shots up. So I do think we'll have plenty of scoring and fantasy opportunities to go along on both sides. Both teams also have been hot starters in terms of their series. Obviously, I think the Thunder, you look at that Nugget series, that was the only time they lost game 1 of a series in this playoffs. They were controlling that game for pretty much the whole part of that game until the end, where the Nuggets came back and won. You look at the Pacers on the flip side, they also have been a successful game 1 team, but it's been in very interesting situations. You look at that Knicks series, extreme comeback there in the fourth quarter. I think it was like a 16-point game with like 5 or 6 minutes left in the game, and they ended up coming back to win. So the Pacers, they're going to be the team that we've been sort of seeing all postseason, right? They're going to be a hot and cold team, and for the most part, they've been pretty hot, but they're going to be a volatile team, right? And sometimes that volatility will play in their favor. I do have the Thunder winning this one pretty comfortably. I mean, a 9-point spread is a tough one to cover, 9.5 here. So double-digit win just to cover. It's a big number in an NBA Finals game, especially one we're expecting a lot of points here. But if I had to pick a side here, I would be taking the Thunder to cover here.
Let's start diving into the DFS side of things. We got showdown slates on both FanDuel and DraftKings. We'll cover DraftKings first. We'll do FanDuel second. Then we'll get into kind of some individual hot takes and predictions. And of course, if there are any questions in the RotoGrinders live stream Discord chat or in the YouTube chat, we will get you there as well. All that we ask is that you are smashing that like button. Let's start DraftKings first. Let's talk captain position, because I feel like there's one guy who kind of stands apart as the obvious raw points top option. He's currently projecting at the captain position for 12 more points than anybody else. So SGA is kind of the clear raw points option today. He's also quite expensive. Kyle, are you going to be prioritizing SGA at captain, or are you going to be looking to go elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard not to prioritize him. Obviously, this is a guy you're going to want in pretty much all your lineups, whether it's captain or utility. But for the captain spot specifically, I do on DraftKings like to get a little bit different at times in these showdowns. Obviously, the two sites are a little bit different in terms of their format and their structure. But DraftKings specifically, yeah, obviously, it's going to be hard to say, like, okay, we're not going to prioritize SGA. We haven't projected for 31% captain ownership. So I think it would be probably foolish to ignore him here. So I definitely want to be at least around that ownership. But there's definitely going to be names down the list that I think will allow you to get a little bit different. And, a big thing about showdowns, at least in my opinion for NBA, is, leaning into, if SGA does have one of his very rare down games, who's going to benefit from that? Obviously, you have a couple of scoring options on his team alone with Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. So you definitely have plenty of options to pivot away from SGA, and then obviously you can go to the Pacers side as well. But I'm also probably not going to be getting too cute here in terms of going down the board too much, because I do think that there's just plenty of ways to sort of build your lineup while also spending up at the captain spot. So yeah, SGA is definitely going to be a priority for me, but I'm also definitely not going to be afraid to look down the board and look for ways to lean into that leverage. And again, if it is one of those rare games where SGA is off, or he's not scoring 30 plus points, I mean, he has a 33.5 player prop, so we're expecting a lot of production from SGA here, but definitely ways to lean into, hoping for maybe a down game and getting some leverage elsewhere.
Yeah, if you are playing any type of cash game or even single entry, I do think there's enough cheap options to just throw SGA in there and find ways in a single entry to get a little different elsewhere in a cash to still be incredibly optimal with SGA up there. Chop, how about you? Are you going to lean into the SGA at captain chalk, or are you going to look to go elsewhere?
No, leaning into some chalk here. They got Denver in the second round there. Since that series, we started to get more and more showdowns because not as many multiple teams on a slate. So starting right around there, we started to look at a little bit more showdown, and it is just obvious real quick for OKC when they play. You either want it SGA or Jokic in the captain spot, then you move on to the next series. Either SGA or Edwards in the captain spot. Take your pick of the superstar. Simply because OKC, not only is he so much better than everybody else on the team, and usually he's right up there with anybody else on the court, OKC has so many role players, and they're all cheap. Like, you can always build roster in the utility around him or the other superstar in that game from the other side. So depending on, whether this game is in Indiana or OKC, SGA, some of the other higher guys, they'll always be my captain MVP captain pick in this case because it's DraftKings. But SGA will definitely be the guy in this series that I lean on more than anybody else.
Agreed with both of you 100%. The one guy I'd be maybe a little bit interested in as a pivot at the captain position, I think, would be Pascal Siakam. I like his price tag. I like his low ownership. And just kind of from like a game theory standpoint, if we're looking at Halliburton likely to be in the torture chamber the whole series, and anytime Dort's not on him, it's likely to be Caruso. Maybe it's Siakam who's got to step up, and if they're going to have a chance to win, it's because he has a big game. But I'm with you. It's absolutely SGA as the top option in the captain position. Chop, I'll keep with you. Where are you looking to go next at the utility to build around him today? Whether you're playing one lineup, who would be the staples, or if you're playing lots, who are the guys you'd be looking to mix in around him?
Well, you mentioned Siakam. He is a extremely boomer bust. in this series or in these playoffs in general. So I think he does make for like a very interesting pivot at captain or wherever you want to put him. First of all, I think Halliburton got hosed on the MVP award. He should have won the MVP of the Eastern Conference.
He did too.
Yeah, he thought he won too. He got hosed. And they gave it to Siakam. Siakam had some incredible spike games in that series. And I would expect him to do maybe some, depending on how long this thing goes, we might not get 7 games. We might only get 5 games. But at some point, he should have some spike games in him. So Siakam's interesting from that. And so that way you can play him in utility because of that too. I just don't know how many times you're gonna see Siakam like outscore SGA. And I think it's pretty easy to build around SGA and captain with Siakam in the utility. Siakam's fine. Halliburton, I just mentioned. I don't know if you're going to do fades, but Halliburton is probably my biggest fade in general. Maybe I play him a little bit in utility here and there, multiple lineups. It's hard to fade altogether, but I'll almost have no Halliburton in the captain position. He is going to get a good share of Lou Dort, and he struggled with Lou Dort a lot in his career. So now Rick Carlisle's a great coach, and he's going to, far be it for me to think he's just going to sit here and do the same thing over and over and beat us. He'll have some game plans for him. He'll try to get Dort off of him. How successful it'll be, I don't know. So I'm kind of on the Halliburton fade. And speaking of Lou Dort, I think he makes for a really good utility because I think he's going to see a lot of time on the court. He's going to be tasked with, here's Tyrese Halliburton, stick with him. I know Caruso's a pesky defender, and they've got some good defenders out there on the perimeter on this team, but it's Lou Dort all the way against Halliburton in this series, as much as he can handle, as much as foul trouble will allow. So I think we're looking at big minutes for Lou Dort, and he'll stumble into stats in some of these games. So I think he's a nice utility play. The Pacers side, two of my favorite utilities, Nembhard and Nesmith. I know we game plan a lot for the playoffs. It's different. These coaches, it's not like the regular season. Things are going to change now. They're going to figure things out. That's the way it is. But from a macro view in the regular season, and it's held true in the playoffs for OKC, they're extremely good defensively, but it comes with a caveat. You can't guard everything on the floor. They do have a blind spot for corner threes. And just so happens Aaron Nesmith is very efficient at that. Miles Turner's not bad either at that shot. I think Nembhard's got some of that in him too, but Nesmith especially, I expect him to hit some three-pointers from the corners in these games if they're going to continue to play defense like that, which I think they will. So Nesmith, I think, really underpriced, especially on FanDuel. We'll talk about it in a minute. But I think he's underpriced in general because he twisted that ankle against New York and had some bad games and lost some minutes, and I just think it was an injury thing. So I think he'll get back on track in this series minutes-wise, and it's going to lead to some. So if you're a prop guy, I'm looking at Nesmith three-pointers, man. I think he can crush those. Chet makes for a good utility spot guy. Hardenstein may get run off the court, but he may not. And Indiana does give up a lot on the inside. Indiana is, pick your poison, and the one they picked is you can have it on the inside. We're going to take away the three-point line. So maybe it's a Hardenstein series here, and he doesn't get run off the court. And he can grab a bunch of rebounds. So I think all those guys are interesting. Long shots, TJ McConnell, because you may see the need for a little extra ball handling in this series, and Halliburton's getting locked up. Well, we're going to play 2 or 3 guards at a time at all times. So maybe McConnell gets a little extra run. And Obi Toppin, real wild card with the way he can shoot three-pointers too and have a spike game. So that's some of the guys I'm looking at.
I do really love this kind of initial start of a build you were talking about here with, hey, Dort gets extended minutes because he probably goes minute for minute with Tyrese Halliburton. Nembhard gets extended ball handling and extra shooting because Dort is on Halliburton and he has a tougher time. Nesmith with the corner threes. It also kind of gives you that remaining salary where you can pick one of Chet or Siakam or Jalen Williams, and there's still enough salary for you to have your choice of one of the cheap punt options. You can get a little bit different if you want. You can go with one of the chalkier options. It's a nice kind of preliminary 4-man build here that I do think the game script will go that's my best prediction of the game script going exactly in this way. Like you said, Halliburton struggles with Dort on him. Nembhard and Neesmith maybe you have to pick up a little bit of offensive load when Halliburton gets doubled, or if he's just in the torture chamber trouble. Kyle, what do you think about this in particular build? And then tell me about your favorite utility guys.
Yeah, I think the most interesting dynamic for these two teams specifically is, for the most part, when you have playoff rotations, you're typically going to get a lot of guys who play consistent minutes, and typically they're going to be pretty big minutes. But both of these teams, we've seen guys, have, a lot of, variance in their minutes played. You look at Aaron Neesmith, a guy who obviously had the ankle injury in that New York series, but we saw him play 32 minutes a couple of games. I think at game one, he played 38 minutes when obviously he went berserk at the end of that game. Same thing in the Cleveland series, had a couple games over 33 minutes, had a couple games below 24 minutes. So Neesmith, that might sound like a risky play, but this is a guy that I would like to lean into, right? And in hopes that that ankle injury is, more healed up. We talked about the long break. So I do like Neesmith quite a bit. Nembhard was kind of a ghost in that New York series for a long time. Final game of the series, finally was able to produce, but more importantly, he was able to, utilize his ability to facilitate more. Obviously, in the first two games, it was Halliburton quite a bit. So I do like the Nembhard call as well. Again, another guy I think people might be lower on coming into the series because he did have a pretty bad series against the Knicks there, even though he did close out with a big game there a few days ago. But I like both of those calls quite a bit. Hartenstein, I do think is a guy who, he's going to start again, but I do feel shaky at best for his minutes here. When looking at that Minnesota series, this is a team that you're seeing, at least two bigs on the floor pretty much at all times for Minnesota with Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert, and Julius Randle. And despite that, Hartenstein still could not play consistent minutes. They're more than happy to play Chet at the 5. They're more than happy to play Jalen Williams at the 5 sometimes. More than happy to bring in the other Jalen Williams for a few minutes here and there. So Hartenstein, I think, is a guy who has very questionable minutes for props. Under is something that I like for him across the board. Took his under 17.5 PRA. So he's a guy that I'm probably going to be staying away from, at least until I see it in these early games. And when thinking of someone who can benefit from him, it might sound weird, but the guy to benefit when he really lost minutes was Alex Caruso. He played 33 minutes in that second to last game against the Timberwolves, started the second half. He's a guy who can be hit or miss in terms of his, really strong permanent production, but we know he can put up peripheral stats as well. So Alex Caruso is a guy that I do like. Love the Obi Toppin call as well. I think this is a series that's going to go small. I think Miles Turner is in jeopardy of losing out on some minutes. I think Hartenstein's in jeopardy of losing out on some minutes. And I think Obi Toppin is a guy who could step in and play some stretch 4 or minutes at the 5 here. We saw it happen a couple of times in the New York series where Miles Turner in game 1 didn't play at times in that overtime game, didn't play at times to close out the series. In the last game of that series, Obi Toppin played 25 minutes. So he's a guy who's going to benefit from Miles Turner losing out on minutes. And I think that's a really strong possibility that happens here with two teams who are going to want to run the floor and play fairly small. Again, I think both teams will be just fine playing, Thunder will play Chet at the 5 very often. And I think the Pacers will be fine playing Obi Toppin and or Pascal Siakam at their 5. So I think it's going to be a pretty small series. I think that's kind of why we see the high total here. Why we see some low props and rebound props for guys like Turner and Hartenstein. But some other, long shot guys that I like. Love the TJ McConnell call. I think on the same token, Ben Mathurin is a guy who is just the ultimate risk reward type play. It's very simple. If he's on with his shot, he's going to play minutes, and he can turn in some pretty significant scoring performances, as we saw in that last series. And if he's not, they're going to sit him on the bench, and they're going to be just fine, letting him, ride pine for the remainder of the game. Like we saw it in that final game. Came out 2 early shots, didn't get him to go. Missed a couple free throws, I believe, early on in the series as well. So, if he's not on with his scoring, he's not going to play. But he's also a guy who, if he is on, we could see him score 20-plus points, as he did multiple times in that New York series. So Mathurin's a risk-reward play that I like. And then last guy I'll touch on in terms of down the roster a bit is Aaron Wiggins, who we saw was a huge contributor in that Denver series. One of the better players off their bench, in all honesty, and just didn't really get the playing time, didn't get it going in that Minnesota series. He's a guy that I would like to, hope for a bounce back here, especially if the game's going to be, or if the ownership on him is going to be fairly low because of those inconsistent minutes in the first series. Aaron Wiggins at 1K is probably the real cheap punt that I like the most here.
It's so interesting how both Kyle and Chop, you talked about at the beginning of this, how Indiana is the volatile team. As a whole, they're boom or they're bust. Yeah, they're probably not going to be able to stack up to OKC, but if they get hot, they can absolutely take it to them. That's how I feel about all the individual plays too. Like every individual play for Indiana, I feel like they have a super low floor, might get 8 minutes, might get 28 minutes and have a big game. Whereas for OKC, basically everybody outside of Isaiah Hartenstein, I feel fairly comfortable with their projection and their minutes projection, their scoring projection. I feel like that's pretty much what we're going to get. On the Indiana side of things, I really feel like, Andrew Nembhard could have 50 fantasy points or he could have 5. Aaron Nesmith could have 35 or he could have 12. TJ McConnell could have 30 or he could have 0. Same with Benedict Mathurin. Whereas all these OKC guys outside of Hartenstein feel a little bit safer. I'm right with you on what you said about Hartenstein with the props. I like going under there. I think if you are running a ton of lineups today, from a DFS perspective, you do kind of have like a duty to get over the 9% projected ownership, I think. If you're playing 150 lineups, when somebody has upside and they're single digit owned on a showdown slate, get over the field on them basically anytime. So I think under on the props, over the field on large field GPPs would be an interesting way to go about that. Chop, anybody else you'd want to mention on the DK side of things before we pivot to FanDuel?
I think we covered everybody anybody that we didn't cover is just completely like, man, hit or miss. You're just totally off the map right now.
SGA, the captain, Obi Toppin, and Nembhard, I think would be my favorite core. With one, pick one of Jalen or Chet Pascal, pick one of Caruso or Dort, and then looking at either Nesmith, Mathurin, or TJ McConnell as one additional Indiana player, I think would be the way that I'm most looking to build on DraftKings today. But let's pivot over to FanDuel. A lot of it will probably be the same, but as Chop mentioned with Nesmith as one of them, there are some pricing discrepancies between the two sites. But now that FanDuel has adjusted so that they have a salary multiplier in addition to a points multiplier at the MVP position, same as DraftKings, it's a fairly comparable game when you're looking at these two showdown slates. Chop, we'll start with you at the MVP. Are you still just as comfortable running SGA here? He is projecting to be highly, even higher owned over here as the MVP. Would you make any pivots? Or are you still going SGA?
No, it's all SGA. Well, when these games are in OKC, it'll always be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from that spot. He's relative to the two salaries on the side, FanDuel, DraftKings. He's a big price bump over here on FanDuel, but that's okay. We can make it up later on in the utility spots. But yeah, those two games are very comparable now. So we can really go apples to apples when we look at it, not like we used to. So, but it's SGA all day. I mean, man, I'd have a hard time in Oklahoma City here. Considering I don't like Tyrese that much in the captain spot or the MVP spot at all, yeah, I'd have a hard time not going 100% Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
I do like the Siakam pivot even more over here than I did on DraftKings, just because the price discrepancy is even bigger on FanDuel. Him and Jalen Williams are right beside each other on DK. On FanDuel, he's even cheaper, but the ownership is just as low. And I don't know. I'm not saying anybody should do this, but I'm not saying you shouldn't if you're playing lots of lineups. I'm kind of talking myself into the idea of Andrew Nembhard at the MVP or captain position, even taking a shot. I kind of just have a feeling that he's going to go off in game one. And that's nothing other than a gut feeling. And maybe he gets a little bit easier of a matchup with Lou Dort on Halliburton. But I kind of have a feeling that against his Canadian brethren, SGA, Andrew Nembhard's going to have himself a big, big game in this spot. Kyle, how about you? Are you still rolling with SGA at MVP, or are you looking for a pivot?
Yeah, honestly, I think he is more expensive, obviously, on FanDuel than the DraftKings, but the utility guys are also cheaper on FanDuel,
Yeah.
so I think it's fairly easy still to get SGA there. So I think in terms of if you are looking at different, I think the only real reason why you're doing that is because of the leverage aspect. Obviously, playing showdown, wanting to get unique, you can do it in multiple different ways. But if that's something you want to do in the MVP spot, that's the only real reason to go away from SGA. I will say all this talk, I think it kind of feels like everyone's just dismissing Halliburton. And that kind of makes me more interested in him from a tournament perspective. I know our ownership is still fairly high on him, but in terms of like an overall public sentiment, I think I've seen a couple things on Twitter. Obviously, we've been talking about it. Yes, he has a very difficult matchup. Yes, he's had a lot of tough games against the Thunder in years past, but he's also a different player now than in those previous games. He's much better, much improved, much more complete as a all-around player. So, I'm sort of talking myself into it as we go on this show. If Halliburton is going to come with lower ownership, he's probably the guy that I think has the best chance to compete with SGA ceiling. But yes, for the most part, I think for realistic and more like optimal scenarios, it's pretty much SGA or just looking to make a leverage narrative angle move there.
Like you said, the utility players are a little bit cheaper here on FanDuel, and they're not quite proportionally priced the exact same as DraftKings. Chop, you mentioned Aaron Nesmith, quite a bit cheaper over here. That's the type of play that I'd be looking at too, as like a core play over here on FanDuel. Chop, who do you like to build around today at utility on FanDuel?
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar cast of characters that I had on DraftKings. I think Chet's in play for multiple reasons here. Siakam is a good, he's solid. The spike games. I think Miles Turner, just going off some of these guys, just listing some of them. Turner, if he's hitting his 3-pointers, like he's going to be very good in this series. Don't know if he's going to be able to do that though. But then we start talking about the real utility guys that I like, and the biggest one is Nesmith to me. Like, I just think he's going to sit out there and hit a lot of 3-pointers. I think he's going to have a much better series to finish off than he had to finish off the New York series because of that injury. And he's the shocking, like his price tag over here is kind of crazy. They really adjusted because of the end of that New York series. He takes up 14% of your salary cap on DraftKings. 14%. Then you go to FanDuel, and Aaron Nesmith costs you 8% of your salary cap. It's like a ridiculously low number. So I love Nesmith in utility. I just think he's going to play plenty of minutes, assuming that the ankle is fine. Lots of minutes, lots of 3-point shots for him. I think a big series is on the way for him. Y'all mentioned Nimhart, a big discount over here too. And again, the New York series was a Halliburton series, and it wasn't a Nimhart series. These things change. They're very fluid with each series, and I think this is very much the Nimhart series and a little bit less Halliburton, in my opinion. So I do like the Nimhart over here. Back to Lou Dort, like 3,400 on FanDuel. That's a really nice price right there. And then all the role players we talked about, pick one or two of them to round out your roster. I couldn't even begin to tell you which one, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, Ben Shepherd, Mathurin. These guys are all Kason Wallace. These are all role players. And any one of them could have a really good game. You just it's a fluid thing with these coaches. So I guess we'll take that game by game. But round out your roster with any of those guys that fit in, and I think that's a pretty good build.
Agreed. That's what I love here with this mid-tier of Nesmith and Nemhard. When you go there, you have the likes of Mathurin, McConnell, Top, and Dort, 4 low-floor, high-upside plays that when you plug in one of them with this core, it basically leaves you 2 spots for one of these star players, 2 of these star players to plug in alongside SGA at the MVP today. Kyle, what do you think of the core that we built? Would you adjust it? And then who else do you like at utility?
Yeah, no, I like the core so far. I think if building this way, I would probably prefer to get to one of the top Pacers guys, because obviously you're going to eventually then have either Williams or Chet. So if you can get to one of Williams or Chet and then Siakam, I think that would be pretty ideal. So I do like that core so far. I think in terms of the plays that I like, a lot of them do sort of translate over. Dort at 3.4 feels really cheap. Obi Toppin at 2.2 is like probably my favorite play for these utility guys. I think that's just way too cheap for a guy who I have projected for 19 minutes, and that's like a minute or two in terms of some other sources across the industry. So yeah, Toppin's a guy that I'm pretty high on coming into the series, and he's a guy who I think, while I haven't projected for higher than most people, I wouldn't be surprised if he plays 24, 25 minutes as well. And obviously, you're probably not going to want to play Obi Toppin and Miles Turner in the same lineup. I think that's another big sort of a deal for Showdown, making sure that a lot of these guys make sense with rules and whatnot, especially if you're doing 150 lineups. But Toppin and Turner are definitely two guys that I'm probably not looking to play together. Something worth noting. And then, yeah, I think a lot of the other guys sort of carry over. I mentioned Alex Caruso on the DraftKings side, especially if you're not playing Hartenstein. I do think Hartenstein and Caruso are pretty close in price to where if you wanted to take a stab on Hartenstein, he can certainly still get there, even if he only plays 20 minutes. Obviously, from a minutes perspective, I am concerned with his minutes, but if he plays 20 minutes at 5.2, he can still get there. So like TJ mentioned, lower ownership, he's not the worst tournament play, especially as a guy who is good on a permanent basis. But Caruso and Dort are like the two sort of wing players for the Thunder that I like. And I talked about Wiggins a little bit, but not as necessary to get to Wiggins on FanDuel, as it feels like he's more of a viable option over on DraftKings. Then the one guy that I didn't mention on the DraftKings side that I'll touch on here is Thomas Bryant at 1K. Obviously, he was so bad that he got played out of the rotation in favor of Tony Bradley in the New York series. Bradley got banged up, and in that final game, Bryant played 13 minutes. Hit a couple threes. So it's always tough to understand if that's going to carry over. Obviously, he's going to need to continue to play well to keep that spot in the rotation. But again, if we're worried about Miles Turner losing out on minutes, Thomas Bryant's going to probably play 8 to 10 minutes, I would say, pretty safely. But I think he has upside for a few more. So at 1K, I'll throw his name in the player pool as well.
All right. Assuming we have SGA up in a tier of his own as most expensive by far, also the most important spend up to play today. Chop of Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Williams, Pascal Siakam, Chet Holmgren. Who is your priority tier 2 spend up?
Man, I would say honestly those man, I don't know. Like, there's not really absolutely splitting hairs. So I would eliminate Chet if you're just between those four and price not mattering. I would eliminate Chet because Jalen on the same team probably is a little bit higher of a ceiling and even a floor. So that would eliminate him. Hallie and Siakam, I think, are very similar. Either one could spike in the game. I think in OKC, I would spend up on Jalen Williams in that tier 2 right there.
Kyle, how about you? Who would be your priority spend up outside SGA?
Yeah, I think, I think it's tough. I think assuming that we're kind of locking in SGA, I typically would like to then look on the other side. So again, it is going to be Halliburton for me. I understand all the concerns with Dort and whatnot on the defensive side, but again, I think Halliburton's really turned the corner in this postseason alone. He's gotten much better as a player, and in terms of his career trajectory, in my eyes, it's improved just in this postseason. So it's gonna be Halliburton for me. I think he's gonna be good enough to beat difficult matchups, but it would be very, very close between him and Jalen Williams there. Again, I think in terms of guys who I think, if SGA has a bad game or a rare down game, who could potentially match or beat SGA, and it's going to be Halliburton or Jalen Williams for me.
For me, I think it's going to be Siakam as my top option of the secondary spend ups. Kyle, I'll go to you first for this one. Utility position, mid-tier, salary saving. Who would be your go-to? And if it's different on the two sites, feel free to separate those as well.
Yeah, I think in the mid tier right now, I guess, does Obi Toppin count as mid tier, or is he a low tier? So
he's a salary saver.
Yeah, okay. So I'll say then for that range, I'm going to go with Andrew Nemhard in the mid range, 7.4 on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel. So a little bit cheaper on FanDuel, but nonetheless, I still think he's a pretty good mid tier option. Definitely one of my favorites. Again, we saw his minutes go up and down in that series, but I mean, he was so good at the end of that Cleveland series, and he was so good in that final game against the Knicks that I think it's pretty clear that they're a better team when he's on the floor and playing well. So I'm going to go with Nembhard.
Nembhard, my favorite as well, but on FanDuel specifically, can't deny the really great price tag of somebody that you pointed out, Chop. Who's your top mid-range play today?
Mid-range, I think, on FanDuel, it's easily Aaron Nesmith, who's borderline salary saver, man. They just really reduced the price on him. I just, for the sake of a little bit of variance, on DraftKings, it would be Nembhard. On FanDuel, it would be Nesmith. And I like the 231 total that you mentioned earlier. That tells the story of exactly how you kind of, if you've been watching this stuff, you know exactly what these two teams are going to try to do and what they want to do. And OKC loves, I want to say pace, but it's not really pace with them. It's more creating havoc with turnovers and bad shots that they rebound, long rebounds, and they get out fast and get easy buckets. But the problem against the Pacers is, man, you don't want to turn up the volume too much on pace. Like they'll run you out of the building, man. They're the only team that can match them. They're just so sharp in the transition game. So I think you're talking these role players, Nembhards, the Nesmiths, and these guys for Indiana. Mathurin, the athletic guy, like Kyle's mentioned earlier. A lot of these guys, athletes on the wings, ball handlers, all these guys, any of them could have a massive game. So Nembhard, DraftKings, Nesmith, FanDuel, are probably my favorite in that tier. But the point being, Indiana, they might get blown out. Who knows? But I think they're competitive in these games, and I just think there's a lot of points, and you're going to see a lot of these role players for Indiana step up.
Couldn't agree more. The Indiana role player side is where I like building as well. The consensus kind of seems for us SGA and then load up on Indiana. Get your SGA in there at the captain / MVP. Hope and assume that he is going to be soaking up all the fantasy points on the OKC side of things. And then Indiana relatively spread out, and you get those high upside games from those role players. Chop, I guess for Kyle, we know Obi Toppin, top salary saving option of the group. Chop, who would you be going with of the really cheap guys?
I'll classify Dort on DraftKings as cheap. He's under 5K, but it's Lou Dort. I see a minutes uptick trying to stick with Halliburton more and more. And that leads to defensive stats. And if he just plants himself out at the 3-point line, a couple of them, especially at home, where he's a good 3-point shooter. He struggles more on the road. We can change this up when we get back to game 3 in Indiana, but at home, he's a good 3-point shooter. Lou Dort's probably my favorite salary saver.
All right, Chop, you on Showdown shows a long time ago now, you built a tradition that became some viewers, including our guy, Butthole Jenkins in chat's favorite part of the show. I want to know, who are you feeling in your plums for tonight's or tomorrow night's, Thursday night's NBA Finals game? Who's breaking the slate?
I'm not going to give the obvious SGA. He's going to be awesome. We know that. I've talked this guy up, and so I'm going to stick with it. I just really think Aaron Nesmith, if fully recovered from that ankle injury, is going to gather you some stats all across the board, defensive stats, some rebounding, a little bit of ball handling, a little bit of playmaking if Halliburton struggles with that. And I just think they're going to plant him in the corner, let the defense collapse is what OKC does, and then give up some open threes. And he is their most efficient 3-point shooter from the corners. I think Nesmith hits about 2, 3, 4 3-pointers, 2, 3, or 4, and then rack up some defensive stats. I'm going Aaron Nesmith, filling it in the Plums, man.
Kyle, how about you? Who are you feeling in the Plums?
Yeah, I like the Nesmith call quite a bit. I'm going to go with off the wall play. I'm going to go with Ben Mathurin. In terms of these showdown slates, I think it's a lot of chalk, right? A lot of these people are, these lineups are trying to find ways to get these 3, 4, 5, main consensus guys in the lineups in unique ways. And then you're sort of just hoping that last guy is pretty contrarian and has that big blow up game. And for me, I'm going to be leaning into a lot of volatility. Ben Mathurin can easily play, 5-6 minutes, score 0 points, and be sat on the bench the entire game. But If he gets in there, hits a couple shots early, plays 18 plus minutes, scores 14, 15 plus points, which we know we can fill it up very quickly, I think he could be easily the guy that breaks the slate. So I'll go with Ben Mathurin.
I'm going with Andrew Nemhard, my fellow Canadian here in this one. I don't know why. I just got a gut feeling. I think 30 real points for Andrew Nemhard tonight is my hot take. Last question I have for you guys before we get out of here. Kyle, who are you cheering for? I always I like my two jobs, right? I got the fantasy sports side of things with RotoGrinders. I got the movies and TV show and video game stuff with Agents of Fandom. I always like to say, like, when I'm reviewing movies, like critically, I have a score, and like as a fan, I also have a different score. Like there are certain movies that are not necessarily good, great movies in terms of quality, but I enjoy them in my heart for various silly reasons. That's how I feel about kind of looking at sports too. As a bettor, you got to look at it and say, what do I think is going to happen? What are the odds on this? I need to be smart with my money, but we're still fans too, right? So we got, who do you want to win? Who are you cheering for? Who does your heart say? And who's your brain say? Who do you think is going to win? Kyle, you first.
Yeah.
And in how many games?
Yeah, we got Mr. Rudy in the chat, standing the Pacers pretty heavily, but I got the Thunder in 5. And I think for a lot of these teams, a lot of these championship events, I typically want the underdog to win. I do think the Pacers are the underdog, but the Thunder aren't the Lakers. They're not the Celtics. They're not like this storied franchise, or they don't have necessarily a superstar that's done it over and over again. So I do want the Thunder to win because I think they are a team that hasn't got enough credit, believe it or not, despite being pretty much the consensus top team. I think a lot of people thought the regular season were trying to poke holes in their resume. Obviously, SGA received the grifter title throughout the course of the season, but he's just simply the best scorer in the league right now. And with that being the case, a lot of people trying to, put asterisks on the Thunder. I do want them to win because I want them to, overcome that. And I think that they're just the most dominant team in basketball. And it's been pretty clear from start to finish on the season. So I would like to see that come to fruition and kind of see some people, put their foot in their mouth there a little bit. So yeah, I like the Thunder to win. I think they win in 5. I think that they dominate the series, maybe 6, but I do think I'm going to go with Thunder in 5 just to be a little bit more, emphatic with my pick here. And I also want Thunder to win.
Chop, how about you? Who do you want to win? Who do you think is going to win?
I definitely want Indiana to win. That's for sure. And there's no doubt about that. I just can't. I just don't want to live in a world where Sam Presti gets paid off for all this stuff he's done over the years, all the tanking and hoarding draft picks. I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to live in a world where I got to watch Chet Holmgren on the talk show circuit for the whole summer. Or anything like that. So I've got to be rooting. Be rooting for the Pacers, man. I got to be rooting for the. Plus, they do deserve. Like, there's a franchise and fan base in general has been around for a long time with a lot of heartbreaks and close calls. I kind of wouldn't mind, and I don't mind the cast of characters they got. Like Halliburton was rated most overrated by his peers. Like, he's a entertaining guy, man, on and off the court. Like, I want to reward that. So I'm rooting for the Pacers. I think they are live. I think they're out of all the teams. I mean, I know the Nuggets were really good. The Timberwolves were kind of overrated. Nuggets were really good because they had Jokic, but the Pacers are a whole different beast, and I think they're live because of that. Because I just don't know how the pace of the series is going to play out, man. OKC may be the one that says, "Whoa, we got to slow this thing down. There's no way we can." Like, I don't know how that's going to play out. So I think they're live. I'm going to go crazy. This is not a popular pick. I'm going to say Pacers get them in 7. I think it goes OKC for Game 7, and it's a coin flip, and anybody can win, and the pressure gets to OKC. I've seen Indiana do it a lot in clutch time just in these playoffs where they're just really remarkable in the last 5 minutes of a fourth quarter. So you give Pacers in 7. Why not?
This feels very much to me like a hockey series in this, as we're in the middle of a Stanley Cup Finals as well, where you have one team that is the clear kind of this isn't the case this year in the NHL, but when you have a team that's the clear better on paper team, they have more good players, but the other team has this goalie who can get hot. And when that goalie gets hot, sometimes it just carries them through the whole series. That's kind of how I feel about the Pacers and the Thunder. The Thunder are on paper the better team, individually, player for player, the better team. The Pacers are a really good three-point shooting team. And if they get hot and they stay hot from the three-point line, they can take anybody out. Any game, any series, doesn't matter who they're facing. So that's kind of how I feel about this one. If they can get hot from the three and they keep it, they absolutely have a chance to win this series. If not, it's probably going to be OKC in 4. And that's kind of what it comes down to for me in this one. I don't really care. I'm happy for both of these teams if they win. I would love to see SGA win and Chet Holmgren lose. Unfortunately, both of those things can't happen together. But growing up watching a lot of Steve Nash and seeing him win an MVP and wanting to see him win a championship too, and always seeing him fall short in the playoffs, would be pretty great to see SGA win a championship the same year that he wins MVP. That'll do it for our NBA show for game 1. Like I said, we will be back, not with our usual crunch time pre-lock style shows like we'll have for MLB. For these playoff games, we're going to be going a day early. Why? Because we want to make sure that everybody, they're going to be absorbing this content and absorbing these playoffs at different paces than usual with it only being one game. So we want to make sure it's out nice and early for you so you can check this out whenever you want. All we ask that you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that'll do it. We'll see you back here later for some MLB content. We got Dean and Bobby for Grinders Live, followed by Cheese, Beer, and Roth for Crunch Time, leading you right up to lock. On behalf of myself and Chop and Kyle, we will see you next time, everybody. Good luck. Peace.